and they were financed by the German Empire, and that this is really a fact. And German agents have and organized the leaders of the Soviet Communist Party to move to Russia at spring 1917, so during the First World War, in order to break out the revolution against the Tsarist regime, in order to overthrow the Tsarist regime, because German Empire and the German High Command knew that after the revolution, Russia will be so weak that Imperial Germany could easily defeat Russia, and that actually happened, because after the victorious communist revolution, the first step of the new Soviet government was to ask peace from the German Empire, and so they concluded an armistice agreement with Austria-Hungary and with Imperial Germany in early 1918. So, but this whole situation was considered as a Jewish-German conspiracy. After the First World War, there was a turmoil in Germany. There was a civil war, or a situation which was close to the civil war. Communist Party was active. The Communist Party seized power in the southern part of Germany, in Bavaria. A Soviet Republic was established, but the communist movement was very active in the whole territory of Germany. But the communist movement was suppressed. The first German Soviet Republic was also suppressed. But the communist movement everywhere in East Central Europe was considered as a Jewish movement, and the Soviet republics were also considered as so-called Jewish dictatorships. And the reason why Soviet republics were considered as Jewish dictatorships was that was also true that great majority of the leaders of the workers' movement, the great majority of the communist movement were Jewish persons, they had Jewish background. That was true. It was the situation was the same in Hungary, that the German Nazi Party, the Hungarian Nazis, made a scapegoat of the Jews for the defeat in the First World War, for the turmoil, what happened, what followed after the First World War. Of course, the Jews who joined the Communist Party, they decided they wanted to get rid of their Jewish background. They did not want to be Jews anymore, because the Communist Party promised a new society where ethnic background, religious background did not count. This is why the communist movement was so attractive for many Jews, especially for those Jews who thought that being Jewish, it's a burden, and they wanted to get rid of the burden of the Jewish background. And this is why they thought that the communist movement, if the communist movement prevailed, they could build a new society, the society of workers, the society which will build up a new paradise where there won't be any platform for any kind of anti-Semitism or racism. But the vast majority of Jews hated the communist movement, especially the rich Jews, especially those Jews who were active in business. So you think probably that the Nazi Party had a detailed program how to exterminate Jews. They had no detailed program. They had no detailed program at all. When Hitler came to power in 1933, Jews were diminished from state administration, and there were many, and anti-Jewish legislation was introduced in 1933 and also in 1935. What was the first step? The first step was Nazis wanted to force the Jews to leave Germany. So the forced emigration, that was the first step. But it did not really work, because There were no countries which opened door for Jewish refugees from Germany. There were no countries. The Jewish population in Germany was about 500,000. Out of 500,000, probably 100,000 German Jews succeeded to leave Germany. There were no place to go. That was the problem. Great Britain was closed, Palestine was closed, United States was closed, Switzerland was closed, France was closed. When the Second World War broke out, the situation changed because Germany conquered greater part of Poland. In the territory which was conquered by Germany, 1 million Jews lived. When the Germans conquered Western Europe, another 500,000 Jews got under the control of Nazi Germany. Under this situation, the German plan was that we need to get rid of the Jews from Europe, and the way of the solution would be to deport the Jews somewhere, to the island of Madagascar. That was the first idea, that the Jews should be deported to Madagascar, which used to be a French colony. I just mentioned that originally, this is not a German plan, this was a Polish plan from the early 20s. The Polish government was thinking to deport Jews from Poland to Madagascar. That's interesting. That was not a German, that was not a Nazi plan at all. I also mentioned that Hitler did not invent anything. What he was speaking about that was already mentioned in the late 19th century, in the early 20th century. What Hitler did, that he implemented those theories which were circulated since the late 19th centuries. So the plan Madagascar, that we need to deport Jews from Europe to Madagascar, but it did not work out. The second plan, that was realized, we need to create a reservation for the Jews, especially for the Jews who lived in Poland. And that reservation was the area of Lublin. That's one of the largest Polish cities. We need a reservation for the Jews. In Lublin area, that was implemented, that plan, hundreds of thousands of Jews were concentrated, mainly from Polish territories. And in other territories of Poland, ghettos were created and Jews were concentrated in ghettos. And what was the German plan? That the Jews had to work in this Lublin reservation and in various ghettos in Poland. The Jews had to work, but simultaneously the Germans on purpose pulled out gradually the food from the reservation and from the ghettos, and purposely they created a famine in these communities, because the purpose was that the Jews had to work and then had to die because of starvation. So that was the theory, and that was also the practice. In the Warsaw ghetto, 500 Jews starved to death on daily basis in the Warsaw ghetto. That was probably the first step of extermination. The campaign began against the Soviet Union in June 1941, when there was a command that was released by the German High Command. According to the command, this war in the East, it will be different what the German army waged in Western Europe. It would be a new war, it would be a brutal one, and it would be a racial war. And the aim of the war was to destroy communism, to destroy, or at least to weaken, the Slavic people, and to eliminate Jews in Soviet territory. And special groups, special death squads, the German term is Einsatzgruppe, followed the German army, since August 1941, these German death squads began to kill Jews by bullets. So this is the terminology, that extermination of Jews by bullets. When the German army occupied a city or a settlement, the Jews had to move to ghettos. Ghettos were established, and these death squads went to the ghettos, or the Jews were pulled out from the ghettos and they were killed, they were assassinated. I also have to mention that Ukrainian civilians, or a part of Ukrainian civilians, had a rampant anti-Semitic attitude, and Ukrainian civilians, local civilians, also helped the Germans to implement this plan for extermination. They were the guards of the ghettos, and Ukrainians were also involved in this extermination project. But here I have to mention that it was not really a surprise, because I already mentioned that Russia had the reputation, the most anti-Semitic empire in the world before the First World War. So it was not a novelty that the local population in Russia, in the Ukrainian part of Russia, had a very anti-Semitic attitude, because it was from the 19th century. And when Nazi Germany arrived and they occupied these territories, this rampant anti-Semitic attitude received an opportunity to realize this anti-Semitism and to kill Jews. That was the second stage of extermination, but it turned out at the end of 1941 that this Holocaust by bullets, it was not the most proper way to kill the Jews, even if in 1941, according to various German statistics, about 1 million Jews were killed by bullets. But it was not the so-called best solution, because of various reasons, because it happened many times that the members of the German death squads became mentally ill, various problems turned up, that the member of the death squads became sexually impotent. It was also turned out that there were many eyewitnesses of these mass killings, and the news on these mass killings reached Great Britain, even the United States. They had to find another way to kill the Jews, and in January 1942 there was a secret meeting in Berlin, in the district of Wannsee, in a castle, and a decision was made that this is the ill-famed Wannsee Conference, and the decision of the Wannsee Conference that the Jews from Europe should be deported to extermination camps. They should be killed in an industrial way. The extermination camps were established and were built up. In 1941, 1942, the most ill-famed ones were the Auschwitz extermination camp, Helmo, Treblinka, Majdanek, Belzec. These were in Polish territories. And in 1942, the industrialized method of mass killings was put into effect. Extermination camps worked almost till the end of 1944. The last Jewish community which was deported was the Hungarian Jewish community, which was deported in 1944. The end of this no word for that, the death of about 5 to 6 million Jews. What is interesting that what happened to the remnant of the Jewish community in Eastern Europe, most of the Jews who survived decided not to stay any more in their home country. So the vast majority of the survivors in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, Romania, decided to leave their homeland and they moved to Palestine, Israel. Many of them decided to move to Western Europe and to the United States, to Australia. Hungary was an exception because Hungarian Jewish community, or the majority of the Hungarian Jews who survived the Holocaust, decided to remain in Hungary. This is why the Hungarian Jewish community, practically the only real existing Jewish community in East Central Europe. In Hungary there is always an ongoing debate on the Holocaust, on the responsibility, the legacy of the history, and there is also a rivalry among the various victim groups of the various tragedies of the 20th century.
Is it true that there were 450,000 that were deported from Hungary? 450,000?
That's true. How do you know it?
I read it in The Economist. They had an article, I think it's this month, and there's a statue about to be erected.
We saw it.
Yes.
Yes.
She showed it to us.
Yes.
The eagle and the angel.
Yeah, you are up to date, very up to date.
But some don't view Hungary as a victim, and they think it should be the other way around.
Yes, yes.
And what do you think about this
Ah, yes.
controversy?
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
that was. I think that was a wrong decision from the part of the Hungarian government to erect that statue. I do not think that the Hungarian government brought that decision because the Hungarian government wanted to falsify or to distort the history of the Holocaust. I do not think that, but I think that was a very bad decision. There is a plan that this year is the 70th anniversary of the deportation of Jews from Hungary. There is a plan that a monument will be erected in one of the main squares of Budapest for the victims of the German occupation, because the Hungarian Jews from the countryside were deported when Hungary was occupied by Nazi Germany. This statue consists of two main figures. One figure is an eagle that represents Nazi Germany, and the eagle attack a figure which represents Hungary, but that figure is also Archangel of Gabriel. So an eagle attacked Archangel of Gabriel. The eagle represents Nazi Germany. Archangel of Gabriel represents Hungary, if you like, innocent Hungary. And the message of the monument is that Nazi Germany occupied innocent Hungary and the Jews were deported. Members of the Roma community were also deported. The message is that Hungarian administration, Hungarian nation was not really responsible for what happened to the Jews because we were occupied. And the problem is that, yes, we were occupied, but there was a Hungarian government under occupation, even if it was a puppet government which was appointed by the Germans, indirectly, but the Hungarian administration made the lists of the Jews who were deported. Hungarian administration implemented deportation. Hungarian army, Hungarian gendarmerie, Hungarian police implemented deportation process, which means that Hungary was not so innocent as it would be reflected by the monument. And so this is the problem now. That
the monument ignores any Hungarian anti-Semitism is what the aim is? Because obviously if the Hungarian police is doing all this stuff, there must be somewhat of an attitude of an agreement on anti-Semitism is the implication? I don't know.
No, here I think there is nothing to do with anti-Semitism. This monument ignores Hungarian responsibility.
Oh, okay.
Anti-Semitism, that's a different issue, of course.
Okay.
That's a different issue.
I also heard that in Lithuania, the Baltic States, Latvia, Estonia, there was some involvement And now some people are actually proud of their involvement as Nazis. They're
And that's a different, yeah.
and
that's
they're
a
teaching in
different-
the kindergarten to
that's a I think that's
Yeah.
a different, it's a complex issue, but I think that we need to understand their story, because what happened in Baltic States, these regions were the part of Russia, of Russian Empire, because Russian Tsars conquered these territories. Finland was also part of Russian Empire. After the First World War, these countries became independent. Finland became independent. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia became independent countries. As a consequence of the Hitler-Stalin Pact concluded 23rd of August 1939, the Soviet Union occupied these Baltic states and wanted to occupy Finland, but the Soviet Union did not succeed to conquer Finland, but wanted to occupy. The Soviet Union occupied the Baltic states, and the intelligentsia was eliminated. Hundreds of thousands of Lithuanians, Latvians, Estonians were deported to the Soviet Union. I think that we can use the term ethnic cleansing to what happened in the Baltic states after the Soviet occupation. The German army arrived in 1941, and the German army was received in these Baltic states as an army of liberators. Many locals decided to join the German army, actually to the German SS, because if they wanted to fight against the Soviet Union, they had to join the German SS. And this is why they joined to the German SS. But after the Second World War, the members of the SS were considered as war criminals, and they were sentenced to death, they were sentenced to life imprisonment, they were sentenced to forced labor. It became a problematic history. They lost their liberty again because the Soviets returned, and the Baltic state became part of the Soviet Union. So it's a difficult history.
We always call them concentration camps. This is the first time I've ever heard someone say extermination camps. That's the first time.
Really?
Yeah, I've never heard
This
that.
is-
Well,
this
that's
is
what
the
they
term.
were, but
Well,
we
of
always
course,
called them
Of
concentration
course, that's what they
camps.
were, yeah, but I've never heard it, the term extermination camps.
Yeah.
In all, any references I've heard to the Holocaust has been.
There
Yeah,
were
they were.
concentration camps and there were extermination camps.
To kill Jews by gassing them, was that something that was common, or
That
was it a
method
new
of
invention
killing,
for?
that method of killing was used at first in Germany in 1939-1940, but the victims of the first gas chambers were mentally ill persons who were killed in the framework of the euthanasia program. According to the racial theory, those who were mentally ill, they were also considered as unfit. The idea was that these persons are only burdens for the economy, and it is expensive to keep them alive, to build homes and hospitals, practically so-called useless persons, and from economic reason it would be better to exterminate them. And this form of mass killing, which was also used to kill the Jews, was used at first time against Germans who were mentally ill. As I know, more than 100,000 persons were killed. However, that process was stopped in Nazi Germany because the relatives complained and demanded to stop, because they were against it, the relatives of these mentally ill persons. So Nazi leaders decided it would be better to stop, not to create tension in Germany.
It fascinated me most was you were mentioning how Jews originally were intrigued by the idea of an ethnic-less society. There's no ethnicity, or it sounds like there's a small portion of Jews that had this philosophy, but these small yet seemingly powerful portion of Jews
Yes.
possibly instigated the communist revolution, and then they and Germany kind of acted together originally. And then I guess what most intrigues me is the transition from Germany to being a patron to being the exact opposite. What was precisely the cause that describes such a 180 flip between patron to not patron for Germany of the Jews?
It's a very reasonable question, and I cannot reply because I do not understand it. There are different factors here, and I do not know what factor was the most significant. One of the major factors was the frustration in Germany after the defeat of the First World War, because Germany, that was a total war, and Germany lost, I do not know how many, do not know exactly, but I think millions of Germans died in the war, and Germany suffered a lot. And Germany lost important territories after the end of the war. Germany lost the colonies. Germany lost eastern territories. A part of Prussia was lost, and there was an inflation. There was poverty in Germany. The Jews were held responsible for the defeat because, as I mentioned, they were so overrepresented in the workers' movement. They were overrepresented in the communist movement. That was true that in the last months of the war, and especially in the early post-war period, these communist movements were very active, and they wanted to overthrow even the German Republic, which was established, I think, in November 1918. Germany lost the war in October 1918, and the months later, the German Emperor abdicated, and Germany became a republic. And these communist movements wanted to overthrow even this republic. But I think that the first frustration was very important. Using anti-Semitic slogans, Nazi Party could mobilize Germans. It does not mean that the majority of Germans were anti-Semitic, but anti-Semitism was used to mobilize at least part of the German society.
So it sounds like three different reasons. One is the communist issue that I guess really hurt Germany because, so it's Germany against communism, and the communism revolution had Jewish roots, and of course Germany being broken, and then of course to galvanize
Exactly.
Germany.
That was the situation was exactly the same in Hungary and to a certain extent in Romania. In the Soviet Communist Party, Jews were overrepresented. And who became the first victims of the Stalinist purges? The Jews. Those Jews who were the leaders of the Communist Party at the era of revolution and in the early 20s. Because Stalin did not like Jews. And they wanted to get rid of the founding fathers of the Soviet Communist movement, but the majority of them were Jewish.
So it sounds like if I were to take this even a step further, you have Jews, which are God's chosen people, trying to throw off their heritage, and then, I could stretch it to the consequences afterwards. God just like, okay, he kind of steps aside and I guess lets them have what they want almost. I don't know, that's just an interesting idea to
That's a different attitude.
It's
not
just
a
something
historical approach, but it could be a reasonable attitude.
So did the communist Jews persecute their own people after becoming communist?
That's a good question. Oops.
Yes, of course they did. Yes, of course
Yeah.
they did because they wanted to implement communist theory. They wanted to transfer theory into reality, and they were also involved in the elimination of the so-called ruling class. Of course, for example, in Hungary, also in the Soviet Union, there were many Jews among the representatives of the ruling class. They were also killed. So if you like, communist Jews killed Jewish capitalists, or they were also involved in the expulsion of aristocrats or the killing of aristocrats. further.
It seems like the ultimate in hypocrisy right there, I don't know, just weird.
But,
I never knew
but
that.
I would like to emphasize that it's a question whether communist Jews should be considered Jewish or not, because they did not have Jewish identity. They joined the Communist Party because they did not want to be Jewish.
Yeah.
So it's also a question that whether they were really Jewish. Yet,
I never
if
knew
you
that.
yet the religious background was Jewish, but
So by blood they were, but by heart they weren't.
yet they were not Jewish. They did not want to be Jewish. Trotsky, for example, was he Jewish? I do not know. Yes, he was born in a Jewish family, but
Right, and Stalin did not,
Stalin was not
didn't
Jewish.
like Trotsky.
No, he commanded to assassinate.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Like, I knew a Jewish student that lived here in Rochester, and she finished her doctorate, and then she said, but I don't want to go back because it's 1939 in Hungary all over again. She feels like it's that way now in Hungary.
At present day in
Yes.
Hungary, I do not agree with that attitude. No, I do not agree with that attitude. There is anti-Semitism in Hungary. That's true. And it is also true that there is a party in the Hungarian government, but there is a party in the Hungarian parliament which should be labeled as an anti-Semitic party. That's true. This party received mandates to get to the parliament, not what I think, not because of the anti-Semitic attitude, but because of the anti-Roma attitude of the party. And that the anti-Roma attitude in Hungary, that's really that's rampant.
For the gypsies,
Yes.
yeah.
And this is the only political party in Hungary which represents that widespread anti-Roma attitude and feeling. And this party became popular, especially in the countryside, and especially on those parts of Hungary which are poor, and there are really conflicts between the members of the Roma community and other communities. So the anti-Semitism in Hungary is not stronger than elsewhere, than in any country in the region.
Is there a large gypsy population still?
In Hungary? Yes, there is. There is no statistics. There is no exact statistics because when we have census, it is forbidden to ask directly the ethnic background or the religious background. So that the question is that do you mind or do you want to reply questions which are related to your ethnic background or religious background? And you are free to say that I do not want to deal with these questions. But of course you are free to reply. So we do not know the statistics on the Roma communities. The Roma community is not a homogeneous community because there are different Roma groups with different cultural backgrounds. But according to various estimations, the Roma population in Hungary must be between 500,000 and 1 million. That's a big community because the Hungarian population altogether is about 10 million. It's a significant proportion. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamás.